or worldwide, international, intellect, dialect from the spiritual, the original, born again miracle, a worldwide, international, a worldwide, international, intellect, dialect from the spiritual, the original, born again miracle, a worldwide.
Hey y'all, welcome to episode number 2 of the kj52 podcast. Wanted to just take a quick second before I jump into this interview with the homie goldinchild and let you know, please, if you enjoy what's going on here with the podcast, head over to iTunes, rate, comment, give me 5 stars, all that stuff. It helps me to drive traffic to the podcast, etc., etc. Also, something I've launched is a Patreon page, which is patreon.com/kj52. So if you ever hear like an exclusive song in here that I play a snippet, you can get that song completely as a download on that Patreon page. Please become a patron. It helps pay for the expenses of this podcast and things of that nature. For $1, just all the bit helps. For $10, you get access to all kinds of unreleased songs, including the ones I play in these podcasts. For $30, you can join the merch club, plus the other stuff. If you ever have music that you want feedback on, you can join for $50, etc., etc. Just go over there and check it out. Patreon.com/kj52. Super appreciate the support over all the years. You guys are awesome. Love y'all. God bless.
Well, thanks, man, for jumping on. For those that don't know, this is my man Goldinchild, a.k.a. Jack Marlowe Jr., a.k.a. Mr. Haircut Slicer, a.k.a. 1/3 of the Whack MCs, a.k.a. what else am I missing? Any more titles? High Priest. Used to go by that name for about 10 minutes.
Oh, come on, man. About 10 minutes.
Did I miss any other titles? I'm forgetting. You've been in, 1/3 of the Rejects, 1/3 of the Rejects.
Yeah, and 1/4 of Lost Cause.
1/4 of Lost Cause. Ghost producer to the stars. Right?
I guess.
Hey, well, so thank you for jumping on here. This is the kj52 podcast. I am kind of working my way up to this documentary, and so to kind of give some people some insight, I thought I would go back and interview some people about some, really significant records and events and situations of my career coming up. So obviously this cannot all be contained in one podcast. I think we're going to have to do it part 2, 3, 4. It'll be like the Lord of the Rings. But
the kj52 trilogy.
Exactly. But I thought we could at least maybe jump in. And for those that are tuning in, I'm going to throw up an exclusive track to the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/kj52. Either maybe like an unreleased goldinchild track or maybe an unreleased track that we did or something like that. So anyway, I thought I would best place to start is really maybe at the very beginning. For those that really, there might be actually people out here that have no idea what I'm even referring to. So in my timeline, it starts with King J-mack, and I put out a little EP, and then shortly, a couple years afterwards, I met this kid. And when I say kid, I mean literal kid. He was a kid at the time. And then we started working on what would be my first and your first full-length project called Sons of Intellect, Insightful Comprehension. So I thought maybe we could just kind of go back to where it all started. It was that little Christian club known as what was the name? What did Mike used to call that spot? He had a name for it, didn't he? X Generation.
Gen X. Gen X
or X, something with X. This is the 90s, so everything was X related. X Games, Extreme.
Yeah.
So
Extreme with X.
Everything was X related. So I remember he invited me to come and perform at this spot, and I'm like just excited for any particular show I could ever get. And I walk in, and the room maybe fit like 50 people. And it was just basically just a room with a tiny stage and some pool tables. It was basically the youth room at the church. And I got up there. I was super awkward. I'm sure I was terrible. I'm sure I had been just working on songs like that week. I know I have footage somewhere with me with like a scary hoodie, and I realized like I have ridiculous acne at the same time. So I think I might have been 19. I was probably still a teenager. But you happen to be in the audience, and I have footage of this to prove it.
Really?
Yes.
I never saw that.
He panned over to you, and you had your Chip and Pepper T-shirt.
Oh yeah, Chip and Pepper.
Do you remember that night?
Yeah, I do. Because he started doing the freestyle stuff, and then Mike said, "Oh, I got a kid that freestyles." And I think at the time I was 13, 14.
Yeah, you were definitely junior high.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Did you you didn't freestyle on stage? It was in the parking lot, right?
No, I freestyled on stage with you, and then we went in the parking lot and rapped a little more because I guess it had piqued your interest. And then a few days later, we met up at a basketball court and did some more freestyling just to see if there was a cohesiveness, I guess.
Yeah, so I think for me a lot of that night was a blur, probably because I was like holding my bruised ego at my performance. But I do remember you coming up to me and you said,
"Yeah."
I don't know why. I don't know why this sticks in my head because I'm like, what? You go, "Yo, man, Magic Mike, man, he's a Christian rapper, bro. Have you checked him out?"
I do remember that, the DJ Magic Mike bass tapes, and I was like, "Yeah, I think he's a Christian."
Yeah, and let's clarify, we're not talking about Magic Mike, the Channing Tatum.
The movie, no, movie. DJ Magic Mike from like the early '90s. Yeah, the original Magic Mike.
And I thought, what a random thing to come up and ask me and to tell me. You're like, it was. I almost felt like you were trying to relate to me, like on some Jesus rap level or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is this little skater boy?
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of funny to think of like the relationship of hip hop to skating in the '90s. Cause
yeah.
All the skater kids that I came up with, none of them listened to hip hop. They were all into like punk and metal. And it was like the '90s was the era where something broke and underground hip hop found a real home with little skate white boys, little suburban skate white boys, right?
Yep. Oh yeah.
So what drew you to that music in the first place?
Since I was young, my cousin was into hip hop. My cousin's like 7 years older than me, so when I was 5 years old, he was 12, and I remember he had showed me Boogie Down Productions, Bridges Over in South Bronx, and I was like, man, this is different. But I always kind of liked it. I think, there's no secret when people hear my music. I think what really kind of, I don't want to say convinced me that I could actually start rapping, but when Enter the 36 Chambers came out in '93 and it had a bit more of an aggressive edge, I was like, man, maybe I could really rap, because I would freestyle and stuff, but my voice, I was a kid, but my voice still, it was raspy and rough. It wasn't that smooth. Like, you listen to Rakim and KRS and these guys, they had those really bombastic, like smooth voices. There was no real roughness to hip hop.
Right.
And prior to 36 Chambers coming out, you had Dr. Dre, The Chronic, and that was smooth too. There was no real roughness to hip hop at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's funny to hear you say. I never thought about it from that angle. I always thought just skate kids like Wu-Tang. That's just what they're supposed to do.
Well, I think, like you said, a lot of skating was kind of punk rock before, and Wu-Tang kind of had that edge where it was like, this isn't like typical hip hop. It had the kung fu flick thing, which who doesn't like kung fu flicks? You know what I mean? And it just kind of was. It was just different, and it grabbed, the attention. It's crazy, like you said. The whole crew that I skated with, everyone listened to hip hop. No one listened to rock. It's weird.
Right. Well, okay, so let's stop here, because I'll be honest, man, what really kind of surprised me about you, and probably what connected us, because I think musically we were a little bit on different polars.
Yeah.
I was not really into Wu-Tang like that, and you just named Rakim and Dre and KRS, and that's like all the guys that I was really into.
Yeah.
Coming up. And so I thought musically we were kind of two sort of polar opposites. Not that those two didn't have overlap, but I felt like freestyling was definitely it was like the common ground.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And not that I was some prolific freestyler at 19, but I was certainly trying to be better. And, you know, like anything in your teenage years, you're just trying to figure it out as you go along. But I can't forget going, man, this is a freaking 13-year-old kid that could come off the head as good as anybody that I knew, that I ran with or kicked it with. And that was definitely, freestyling was really like I have to say, was like a rite of passage. Like, it wasn't like an optional skill set. It was like, you had to do it. Whether you were good at it or not, you were going to get tested.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like in that era. And so I'm curious to know, was it something like you sat down one day and you were like, I'm just going to try and come up with a rap off my head, and the words came?
Yeah, and what's crazy is thinking back to that time, I remember when we actually started talking about making music, and you're like, you've never written a rap? And I was like, nah, man, I just freestyle. I never really thought about sitting down and writing, because remember, I was still at that point, I was like, can I really do this? This is the weird thing, and I never really talked about this publicly. Even in the skate circle that I ran in, we all listened to hip-hop, but the minute I started rapping, all my skate friends were like, well, dude, you can't rap, you're white. Like, even if you're good, that's just not acceptable. Like, there was still... No joke. I'm not even joking, dude. Like, and when I really started taking it serious and doing shows with you, some of my skate friends weren't even friends with me no more, because they were like, dude, you know, you're not black. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Is this really like a thing? Like, it was just so odd. But yeah, man, I just one day was kicking it with some kids at school that were spitting raps, and I just started rapping. And you know, of course, I probably thought it was the greatest thing, and looking back, it probably wasn't. But just the ability to have like a mental dictionary and be able to learn how to rhyme words. I really don't know how I knew I had this skill set. It just kind of came, and then meeting you really kind of fostered that and pulled it out of me more. And yeah, man, it's just crazy because nowadays barely anybody freestyles. And so, well, I'm an artist. I'm not really a rapper.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that you just said it. I think the key there is the idea of a mental dictionary, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if having a mental dictionary is inherently ingrained or it's the way the brain works or something like that. But you're right. Like, it seems like guys you just either know how to do it or you don't.
Yeah.
There's no, like, I mean, I would assume maybe you could learn it, but.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really met someone that can learn it. Like, anyone that I've met kind of has always freestyled. Like, what really amazed me about your freestyles was I could just freestyle whatever I was thinking, and then you would actually freestyle, hey, throw me a word, or give me an image, or give me a topic, or hold up this thing, or pull this out of your pocket. And I was like, wow, that's a whole different aspect of freestyling, and it challenged me. Like, I hadn't thought of that. I think that actually made me a better freestyler. Because then it was, yeah, man, anyone can just sit there and rap whatever they're thinking, but can you take this and do that with it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, well, for me, that whole idea was that you're right. The easiest thing to do with freestyle is just have a conscious stream of thought.
Yes.
You know, because you're not parametered by any sort of rules. But you're right. I noticed as soon as I had to get topical or specific, I was like, oh, this is pushing me to be better. And the other thing part of it was I knew that there was always like this underlying current of, is this guy really freestyling or is he kicking a written? So
yeah.
Once you got topical, there was no denying.
Yeah, there isn't.
Yeah.
And it was funny.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm eating my oatmeal. Please go ahead.
What also, and you'll relate to this, the era we came up in, you know, everyone had what was quote unquote the crutch. So you knew how to find someone's crutch in their freestyle. You'd hear the phrase they'd always draw back on, and then they know, okay, he's definitely freestyling because he's referred to this phrase or this word almost every other bar. And that was almost like a thing. Oh, yeah, he's definitely freestyling because there's his crutch. You know what I mean? Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'd call it clutching or crutching or, your fallback word. I used to call it the fallback word because it's the word that you would fall back on when you couldn't think of something. So the best guys I always knew, they never had the fallback word.
Yeah.
They learned how to eliminate the fallback word out of their vocabulary. So for most dudes, it would be like, I grabbed a microphone and I blank. Or I'm coming off the head like blank. You know, they would always have some sort of phrase that you could tell. And usually the novice guys, you know, they use their clutch word all the time, or phrase, or whatever you want to call it. But the funny thing I look back on this now, and I was thinking about this today while I was getting ready. I was like, man, I met you. I want to say I met you, or I brought you to something the exact same week that I first met my wife. Even though I kind of I peripherally knew her and I peripherally knew you, but I'm saying like there was a very significant week where I want to say me and her probably went on our first date or something like that, and it was also like the first time I ever brought you. So I remember this very clearly. Is I had a show, and I brought you as the hype man.
Yes.
Or I brought you just to like kick a verse or something. I was like, yo, I'm going to do the show. Why don't you come through? Or I'm going to pick you up. And I never forget, you did the whole show. You would not stare at the crowd. You kept staring at me. And I was getting irritated. I'm like, bro, you got to look at the crowd. Stop looking to me to, like, give you the cue. Yeah. And I think that's probably maybe was the beginning. And, you know, I was a youth leader at my church. And so I probably was the time where I was, like, feeling a sort of degree of, like, leadership or mentorship or taking somebody under your wing or just, you know, the idea of discipling somebody through your life or, you know, just through lifestyle. And I think that's probably because I'm like, okay, I'm on the verge of 20. This is still a kid. So, you know, there's not a lot of common, like shared experience from just like two homies kicking it because obviously the age range between 13 and 19 is a big difference. Yeah. And I was like, if I'm going to keep picking this kid up and taking him places, it's just going to look weird. It's going to look weird. Yeah. So I remember.
Well, you know, my dad really trusted you. I remember, you know, you and him having a conversation, and then, you know, he told me, as long as you're with this guy, I'll support what you're doing, you know. Because I think that, you know, at the time I don't want to say I was straying from my faith, but I knew my dad knew that a deeper relationship with Christ would come out of it more importantly than an album or lyrics, you know what I mean? So
yeah. So we're actually jumping ahead a little bit because I was still rolling.
Sorry.
I was still rolling as King J-mack in the day. Day, and I was still doing solo shows as King J-mack. So you actually kind of really more started off as like a hype man. Yep. You know, / I'd give you like a little spot to kick a verse and whatever. And I remember I kind of remember consciously going to your mom, I think, and being like, hey, just so you know, like I'm not some creeper guy trying to pick up your kid. Like, you know, I look at this as like a mentorship thing and you don't have anything to worry about, whatever. And so I feel like I brought you to a few shows, and probably like one of the first ones I felt was like a really significant thing was when we opened up for T-Bone. Do you remember that?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep.
And
yes, I do.
That's still the King J-mack era, but there was this church up in Orlando that would bring in T-Bone quite a bit. So this was like a big deal to open up for T-Bone. And
oh yeah, especially in that time, he was like,
And I remember you were such an underground little hater. Like if it wasn't like this type of hip hop, you were like, nope, not feeling it, don't like it, that sucks. Yeah, that's whack.
Yeah.
And I remember like a few times being like, well, that might be your feeling, but like there needs to be like, you know, hey, like let's take advantage of these opportunities. Yeah. And I want to say like that show was the first show where we ever like got a hotel and stayed overnight. I think is that the one where I scared the crap out of you in the middle of the night?
Yeah, because you kind of talked in your sleep and it was crazy. Yeah.
So let me explain what happened. So basically, you know, the show actually went really, really well. I remember the show going really, really well. I don't even think
it did.
Pressed up. I don't think I had a King J-mack tape or anything. I think I just had I might have had like a dubbed cassette tape or something like that. So I was definitely like still coming up. But I have always been I've been two things growing my whole life. I've been a super heavy sleeper, and I talk quite a bit. I've been like a very active sleeper. So I think at the time I was renting a room from a family, and I would just start yelling in my sleep, and I would wake them up because I would be such a loud. I used to, my brain was trying to process everything. So I remember this funny because you told me the next day. You said that as you were getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, I sat up in the pitch black dark and I yelled, "Rock! What's wrong with you guys?"
Yeah, like you were yelling at the crowd, like, "Why aren't you rocking with me?"
You said it like freaked you out, and then I just laid right back down and went to sleep. Went back to sleep.
Yep. And laid right back down on your pillow, and I'm just standing there like, what just happened?
So definitely the beginning of many road stories.
Oh, yeah.
That would happen. But anyway, so I think I kind of feel like at the time, in my head, I was like, well, I'm going to do this King J-mack thing. Did I have a tape then yet?
You were working on, at that time you were recording Mathematical and a lot of those new tracks with that producer in Orlando, and you were in the process of that. That's where you were at that point.
So I would have been in college. But no, I feel like I made the Back from the Grave tape at some point.
When I met you, you already had the Back from the Grave tape.
Okay, so I did. Okay, so I did have a piece of product. Yeah, I did
Yes.
make like a little 4-song cassette, which down the road I'm going to break down those songs for you guys in all their not glory. But anyway, you're right. So I went off I remember I had just met you. It was like also the same time I went off to Bible college, which is also right when I started dating my wife. And you're right. I did started going into like a stylistic change where I was like, I got to get better. Like I just have to get better as an artist. But I didn't really have any beats or anything. So there was a guy by the name of Tony Payne out of Orlando that was like really out of his generosity, like just supplying me with tracks and studio time and all that stuff. And I was still King J-mack, and I came back from that trip. Like I'm curious to know from your perspective, like what was going through your head at that time.
Well, I remember you went to Bible college, and I remember we were doing shows, but it slowed down because you were really focused on being at Bible college. And then you had told me you met this other dude, and you kind of started this hip-hop jazz fusion thing called Sons of Intellect.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay, cool, Move away, start a rap group, I get it. I mean, but we never really were a group, so I wasn't really upset about it. I was like, oh, I've always just kind of rolled with him and been his hype man anyways. I don't really think that's going to change. It'll just be with this other guy, whoever it is, which I never met the other dude.
Yeah. So let me pause that. Let me pause that for real quick and explain, because people are like, what? So when he said I went to Bible college, let me clarify. I went 2 hours away, and I went for one whole semester.
That's funny because it seemed way longer to me.
No, it was
just shows you that's what it is to be 14, 15 years old.
Exactly. Yeah, and so at that Bible college, everybody had to have a student ministry. So you had to do some sort of ministry, and so I was like, well, I rap, and this other kid raps on campus, and I was like, can I make that my student ministry? And they were like, sure, because at the time, Urban D, or Tommy Colonin, had left, and that was his student ministry. And they were like, we don't have a rapper now for the college. And they were like, well, what's your name? And I'm like, I don't have a name. They're like, well, you probably should come up with a name for your group.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not a group. It's like he raps, I rap, so we're always on the same stuff. So I remember sitting in chapel one time, bored, and I just started writing down ideas. And for no particular reason, Sons of Intellect was on the paper. I had no real significance outside of just it sounded cool. Like there's no like spiritual.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, what does it mean? Because in Christian everything, there has to be a deeper meaning.
Right. Exactly. You're exactly right. So anyway, you're right. And so I came back, and that was over because I wasn't able to go back. I didn't have enough money. It was, other things were changing. I went to work at the church. My youth pastor left. I took over at the church for him. But like in your head at the time, granted you're ninth grade, were you having rap dreams? Were you like, this King J-mack guy is my ticket You know, like what was going through your head?
I'll never forget. You opened up again for T-Bone at my high school on the football field. And my best friend at the time, he's like, dude, if you're linking up with this guy, man, you're going places. Because, like, it was so funny because you really captured the crowd. Like, you really had the crowd. And I remember that was when you had just recorded Mathematical, so you were doing that. And I remember I was like, well, I'm not really even sure what's going on with this, but that's when I actually started to believe, hey, man, you know, this could be something. And sadly, at that point in my life, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, like, hip-hop was more important to me than God. Like, I would not admit that at the time, but looking back, being older now and being married and having children and really committing my life to Jesus, I realize, but, I mean, how committed to God can a 15-year-old really be? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
But you're always harder on yourself than you know what I mean? So,
sure.
But, yeah, I do remember that. I was like, yeah, man, this is going to be a thing. Like,
did I bring you up on stage for that show?
No,
not at all.
And I remember, no, not at all. And I remember later on, a week or two after that, you had told me, like, man, I really like how you handled that, because I had asked you, hey, man, can I do this show? You're like, no, I'm just going to do it solo. And you had told me you're really proud of how I handled that. Like, I didn't get an attitude about it, and I just kind of stayed there and supported and enjoyed the show. And but I mean, you didn't totally avoid me. Like, after you got off stage, we're hanging out. I got to meet T-Bone that night with you. It wasn't like, you know, you avoided me. It was just, hey, man, I'm doing this show solo, you know, so.
You know, it's funny, now that you mention that, I'll bet you I was probably trying to test you. And
probably.
I think that's probably, now that I think about it, that's something I probably would have done. Because I probably would have been like, let me get you as close to glory as you can and then yank it away. Because that really shows maturity, because I was like, man, it's, you know, you're a 15-year-old kid it's hard enough as a 20-year-old trying to handle the stage and all that comes with it. I was like, as a teenager, it's going to be 15 times harder. And, you know, like, I remember being very, like, conscious, like, I'm doing this for a real reason, and if you can't be on that same page, then I can't roll with you. And I wonder if that's maybe what was the next impetus to why I would have been like, well, let's be a crew, or you can be in Sons of Intellect. I wonder if that was probably the catalyst.
Maybe it was.
Because didn't we start, I feel like not too much longer after that, you know, I changed my name.
We, I think right after that we recorded Boogie Down Style. Remember that?
That's right. Okay, so that's a good segue. So the studio that I used to record at quite a bit in Fort Myers, Florida, every once in a while they would hit me up, and the owner would say, hey, dude, we do these free sessions with our students. We teach audio engineering, so you can come in, and I'll give you a free session, and you just work on your songs, and they get the chance to engineer it. And I would always, you know, I was broke 20-year-old, so I'm like, dang, any opportunity I can. And I think you're right. I think that is what happened. We brought in some samples, right? We brought in some track samples.
Yep.
And rather than actually writing a song, this would actually become a funny sort of template for us, the way we would write songs. But we were like, let's just freestyle the whole song. Do you remember that?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yep.
That's what we did. We were like,
and then we would leave a break for like this sampled loop of someone saying, "It's that Boogie Down Style." What was that group? It was someone that Rev Run had put out.
That was Sin Assassins.
Sin Assassins. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, they said that at the end of the song, and so they
now
looked
we're
up
going
like
royalties.
I know, right? I gotta find that, man. There's so much stuff in here now. I'm gonna have to go find. I think they're all in cassette somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe I can put that up.
Days of cassette tapes and DAT machines.
Right. So we must have did that, and then I feel like at the time there has to be a significant shift. So I remember just right around that time I went on staff at the church. I was working at Cornerstone, which was an inner city. We were inner city home missions plant, and I remember something in my head must have been like, I can't keep going by King J-mack. Like, this is a terrible rap name.
Yeah.
And I think at that point I had moved to a different place. I was dating my wife, now wife. I was dating her. And I never forget, I had this conversation with Dax from LPG on the phone. And he said, I sent him my demo, and he goes, what's your name? And I said, King J-mack. I said this, and he goes, I would call you KJ. I'll never forget that.
Really?
He goes,
Really?
He goes, I would call you KJ then, or something like that. Like he was like, that's what I would call you. And I was like, I remember going, man, maybe I should just call myself that. And I remember, do you remember this time? And I think we're going to end it up here because I got a jet, and this would be good for a part 2 because then we can move into the Sons of Intellect stuff. But do you remember the day I came over and I said I was changing my name?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And
yeah, I do, because you had a couple of choices.
I did?
Yeah.
See, that I don't remember. Please elaborate. I don't remember that.
One of the names was like Cajun. And I was like Cajun? You're like, no, like KJEM or something. And then at the time we started, you had met up with Dirt out there in San Diego, and he wanted to call you like KJ the Knife or something. And
he wanted to call me KJ Mack the Knife.
Yeah, KJ Mack the Knife or something with knife in it. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then you just kept toying around with the KJ thing, and then the 5-2 came later. So, yeah, man. I do remember that. You had, like, I think 3 choices. I can't remember the other one that you had. But
was it something like KJ the Son of Man or something like that? Do you remember? I remember you talking me out of that name, clearly.
I think it was like KJ the Son or something like that, yeah.
Everybody's rap names were like Blankety Blank the Blank Blank.
Yeah.
Del the Funky Homo Sapien.
Yeah, and I was like, man, I'm already Golden Child. We can't have like KJ the Son of Man and Golden Child.
Well, I remember you're like, Son of Man. You're like, what do you think, you're Jesus? I'll never forget you saying that. Like, you were like, I was like, no, like the Son of Man, like that's referring to Adam. He's like, no one's going to get that.
Yeah, I do remember that. I'm like, no, everyone's going to think you're Jesus.
And it's funny because I really feel like the 5-2, I never forget this. I remember coming to your house, which I would do on the regular to pick you up or to work on music or just something. I remember standing in your because it was like to go into your house, there was a little porch door entry. And then I would have to open that door and then knock the door. And I remember somehow or another 5-2 just popped in my head, which is there was no significance to that at all. Like there was nothing like, oh, that's blankety blank, or it's because of this. And I just remember kind of like walking in and going, I'm gonna call myself kj52. And I go, what do you think? You're like, that's cool. I was like, all right.
Yeah, that was it.
That's about it.
I do. Like I remember that.
It was never like, oh, yeah, what does that mean? It was just like, yeah, sure, throw some numbers on there and don't spell them the way it looks so that it'll be confusing to everybody for the rest of your life.
Hey, come on, check out this beat.
That's literally was. And so did you have any sort of production stuff at the time?
Yeah, because I remember it was right when I got my first drum machine and sampler because we had done Worldwide. And, let's kind of get into something like stuff. But, yeah, I had just acquired some equipment, yeah.
So I don't think people can really get perspective on this, but it's funny to think that a 15-year-old kid, which now doesn't sound weird that a 15-year-old kid would be in his bedroom making beats. But
back in our day, it was odd.
That was definitely not, that was not the norm because, to one, anybody that made beats, you had to make a significant financial investment. Like, it was not cheap to buy a drum machine. It was not cheap to buy a sampler. It was not cheap, it wasn't readily available. You had to dig out what you're going to do. And it's not like there was the internet, so to speak, to like go and research. So like if you were going to sit there and make this investment to make beats, like you had to really be committed to your craft. And then to just be 15 and to be able to figure out a drum machine and figure out a sampler and have the ear to find sounds and to program a drum machine. Like, I mean, I don't think people really understand the significance of that. And I remember at the time going, and I remember, it's not like cut, paste, drop. Dudes send me beats now, like off their Atari Beat Generator or something like that. Yeah. This is outboard gear that you had to sync up sometimes we did that to good effect, and sometimes we had no idea what we were doing. But anyway,
Yeah.
I just remember, like, every time I was coming over then, it became, like, the thing to do. Like, we'd go to your house, I'd sit on your bed, you'd show me a new beat that you did, we'd freestyle to it, and that became, like, the creative process.
Yeah.
You know, your brother would come in and annoy us.
Yeah.
You'd throw him out, and then your other brother would come in and be like, "Why are you in my room still?"
Yeah, because I shared a room with my brother. I remember that.
And I mean, if you think about it, it was kind of a cool incubation creative space. If you think about it, where like you could work on music without the fear of, you know, how you might feel, or you could work on music and not be like, you know, it was just a lot of it was an interesting time if you think about it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think out of that stuff usually comes pretty good music. So I'm going to end it here because I think we definitely need to do a part 2 for the Sons of Intellect era, you know, when that actually became a thing and, you know, going out and opening up for, you know, the funny thing was then we started actually opening up for all the groups that we grew up listening to.
Yeah.
And we started touring and we started, you know, leaving the state, and all this is happening independently, and like, you know, it was.
Hey,
it was
just so you know, I have a shoebox with all those flyers, bro. All those backstage passes and everything.
Really?
Yeah, I found it the other day in my studio room.
Snap a picture, send it to me, man.
For sure, I will.
All right, man. Well, we're gonna definitely do a part 2. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Golden Child, King J-mack, Sons of Intellect era, part 1. Love you guys. kj52 podcast. God bless.
Peace.
Torn between love and hatred, several ways are held sacred. Thoughts of ill nature, sent to spawn of atoms, can we become foolish men? Compassionate is sin, helpless like particles of dust in the wind. Pretend to comprehend perils awaiting in the end. Betrayed by friends and lied to by brethren. A broken heart in my chest to bless my conquest. Release stress, deep breaths, caress the face of death. Shine to open the mind of the dumb, deaf and blind. Mountains climb, so my flesh will fall aside. Body and soul collide, praying for the day in which they coincide. Eyes are ran dry for the tears of which they cried. Failure to realize callings placed upon our lives. Asking many questions but never waiting for the reply. We'd rather believe the lies than to open up our eyes. Replacing reality with highs to speak the truth, but yet my words are never heard. Absurd to think that we rob ourselves of our purity and wealth. I felt the pain of those reaching out for help. A broken man for the sins with my soul is dealt. Crying out to Jesus when my life falls to pieces. You ignore my thesis cause the blind man can't see this sequence of events brought on by diligence.